Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday Talks at the Atwood. My name is Kevin Wright. I'm the Executive Director here at the museum. Welcome on this very dark and cold Tuesday evening. We're so glad that you can join us. Before I introduce our speaker for this evening, a few housekeeping items. We are still a museum, so we still have some openings coming up. We're temporarily closed for the month of November, but starting in December, we'll be open from 1 to 4 on the first 3 weekends of the month, Fridays and Saturdays, 1 to 4. So please make your plans to come and visit us at the museum. We will request that you make reservations, but if you walk in, that's fine too. We'll be here to welcome you. We are looking forward to having Keith Parsons bring his model train set back in, and they'll be up and running in the main gallery to have a little bit of our holiday flair. I also want to mention that coming up a week from today is our best bake sale in history. It's our annual fundraising event for the museum. So we have an opportunity for you to come to the museum and see a whole bunch of different baked goods on the 23rd, 2 days before Thanksgiving. We've had a lot of orders, pre-orders for pies and stuff. So a lot of wonderful baked goods for you to take home for the holidays, and so hopefully you'll join us there. During that day also, we will have our historic halls year-end sale in the gift shop. So if you're looking for some Christmas gifts, there'll be some nice discounts for our non-members and some deep discounts for our members. So please make your plans to join us next Tuesday. That will begin at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the bake sale will run until they sell out. And then we'll go from there. Also on December 11th, we'll be open for our hearthwarming event. We didn't do it last year because of COVID, but we're bringing it back this year. An opportunity for you to come in. It will be free to the public. The hours for that event is 10 to 4, and we'll have some a cozy fire going in the fireplace in the old house built by Captain Joseph Atwood. So make your plans to come and see us on that day, a fun-filled day. We'll probably have some cookies and some hot cider. The trains will be running, so it will be a good family event. Also, during this time of, this is a good time of the year to give back to the community. So again, we're having our Stuff a Sleigh. Please make your, if you have some new hats, mittens, gloves, any of those kind of things for children up to 17, 18 years old, feel free to bring them to the Atwood Museum. We'll put them in our sleigh, and we'll have them ready to be picked up by the Chatham Angels Fund. And it's always a nice thing to give back and supply some warm clothing for our children in need. So please take advantage of that. That will run probably all the way that will start anytime next Tuesday all the way through December for our Stuff a Sleigh. So now let me introduce our speaker for this evening's lecture. Camille has worked in the restaurants since a young age, and worked her way through the industry learning about wine and life from all different sides of the business. She still carries her love of food and wine with her in her new and unexpected role as a radio show host and video producer. So let's hear now how she navigated her way through her career and to be where she is today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you today's speaker, Camille Broderick Rodier.
Hello, can everyone hear me out there loud and clear? Well,
yep, we can hear you.
Buddy, my name is Broderick Rodier. Yeah, great. My name is Camille Broderick Rodier, and thank you for the introduction. And it's an honor to be a guest speaker for the Atwood Lecture Series. Thank you for inviting me. Before we begin, it is that hour called cocktail hour. If anyone already has a drink, that's great, but I invite you and encourage you to maybe have a nice cocktail. If you'd like to go get one or a glass of wine, you're welcome to do so. This is a bit of a conversation and some stories that I'm going to be sharing with you. So it may be fun. And in the meantime, if you're grabbing that drink, I am going to open one for myself. I typically don't open bottles of wine sitting down on a couch if I'm serving it properly, but I will. I will for this occasion. So this is a Veuve Clicquot non-vintage yellow label, and I'm just going to do this for fun because well, champagne bottle opening is always sort of a pet peeve of mine because I see so many people do it the wrong way and properly, and that's fine. I don't want to correct anybody, but I don't want anyone to get hurt. That's the truth. It's it can be dangerous. I've seen the cork go. So quickly, we'll just do a quick little lesson to kick this off with a nice, beautiful bottle of wine. So usually you present the bottle of wine to the guest. I wish I could share it with you. There you go. And you take off the beautiful wrapper. There usually always is a little marker here. There's a beautiful marker there that's easy for it to just rip right off. And I think the number one thing that people forget or that they do wrong is you're supposed to leave the cage on at all times. It's actually safer and it helps you have a better grip on the bottle. So what you do is you just transfer the bottle to the other hand. And what you do is you just actually twist from the bottom and from the top at the same time, holding the cage. And then you just feel the pressure come. And the cage gave me some grip and then it just comes right off. So easy. But you never really want to take your hand off the bottle once you release that cage ever. And you never need to take the cage off. Once you take the cage off, the cork is free. It's loose. It can shoot out like a cannon, truly. And I've seen it happen. And you can make a noise. Some people say that you're not supposed to make a noise and it's not supposed to be loud, but the truth is it's fine. It's an announcement. It's a bottle of champagne. Something fun's happening. I'm going to give a little pour for myself. And one little fine dining tip for champagne is you're supposed to pour it in one continuous stream in the glass. And how that's done is you let the bubbles sort of subside a bit as you pour. And have a little taste. And I am doing a white wine glass. Flutes are great. They're fun and celebratory and beautiful. But a lot of champagne these days are actually being consumed in a white wine glass because you can actually smell more of the aroma. So it's totally fine to even ask it for this or pour it in this. So there's nothing wrong with the white wine glass for your champagne. Great. So this is a story about a young lady, me, and my journey through the restaurant industry and my growth and my love of wine, and how I ended up in the media industry, really. So I'm going to share my screen and just show some pictures along with my presentation or with my stories here. All right, so it begins here in Chatham at the great and lovely Chatham Bars Inn. It was 1999 and I graduated from St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I had worked in restaurants through my youth and I worked at an ice cream store. I was a host at a restaurant. And then I worked in restaurants during college for extra money. And so it was always sort of my side job. And then after college, I came to the Cape, came to Chatham where my parents lived, and decided I would take the summer off to relax, which I think a lot of graduates would do before they jump into the real world, right? And I thought I would have a fun summer and maybe waitress somewhere and then think about my future. And I was home and I remember my father came home one day and he brought an application for Chatham Bars Inn. And I thought, wow, this is great. Sure, I'll go there. I'll try that. It's beautiful. I knew the place. And everyone knows it's such an iconic property. And I thought it would be wonderful to work there. Sure, why not? So I applied for a job at the pool house, which was down by the water, as most of you probably know. And I went in for the interview, and I think the interview was rather lengthy. I remember my parents telling me that I was gone for a while. I spoke a lot with the general manager who was interviewing me. And by the end of the interview, he had offered me a management job of the pool house. And I thought, oh, wow, this sounds exciting. And I took the job right on the spot. Learned then maybe to sleep on some decisions, but I took the job right on the spot. And I told my parents, and that was my summer. I started as a manager at the pool house and slowly made my way up to the tavern as well. And that job was not at all what I wanted to do that summer. I wanted to have fun. And here I am as a manager at a very young age, 21 years old, and managing people my age or older, and having to sacrifice a lot. So I think my first lesson in management was sacrifice, right? You have to really sacrifice your own time for your staff. And you also have to just give up some things that you normally would do, because you need to set a role and example for a lot of the people that you work with. And I'm sure my parents helped me at that stage. But I had a very hard and challenging summer, but it was incredible because I learned this was something I wanted to do. I liked it. I felt that it was a good fit for who I was. And Chatham Bars Inn really actually was, I feel, a place that set a tone for the future of all the places where I would work. There are, as many of you know, if not, there's just beautiful history with Chatham Bars Inn, and it's a historic hotel of America. It's one of the few coastal properties on the Cape that you can look out on the ocean. And I just remember there are times, and I worked there into the off season. I remember there are times where you just walk out on the front veranda and you could see the full moon just sitting on the ocean. And those images and the beauty there just still are still with me. And the staff were great working there. A lot of long time people who would continue there for the seasons. And it just was a beautiful, fun place to work for my first experience. But yes, it was hard, but it was still fun when you learn and, you challenge yourself in that way. And so toward the ends of that season, I ended up waiting on a couple in the tavern, and they were sitting at one of the VIP tables. They've done a lot of changes since I've been there, but the main tavern room, there used to be these two VIP tables in the corner, and they have these beautiful glass enclosed cases that had these beautiful sailboats. And I remember those are sort of the VIP tables. And this couple was sitting there, and I served them, and they had a nice dinner. And at the end of the meal, they said, "Thank you so much. We think you've done a great job taking care of us. We'd like you to know that we own a restaurant in Boston, and we'd love for you to work for us." And they wrote down a number on a piece of paper and a name. And I thought, okay, all right, sure. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I could have been there longer. I didn't have a plan. And I said, "It sounds great." So to be Radius in Boston. And this was a big change for sure, going into the city, which I eventually thought I might go into Boston. And so I remember I showed up there and I met Christopher Myers, the owner. Michael Schlau was the chef. And this restaurant had opened in 1999. So just the year earlier. And it had been in this beautiful, it was set in this beautiful old bank, and it was all circular. You can tell in that picture. And it was just a beautiful, one of a kind property. I mean, really beautiful. When you walked into the dining space, it was one of a kind. And it was one of the top fine dining restaurants in Boston at the time. I didn't know any of this going into this job. I was not in the scene at all. I was too young. I just wasn't really aware of but when I remember getting the tour of the kitchen, I felt like I already had the job and this was where I was going to work. And so it was. And the place was relatively new, so there was a lot of hype going on. So I remember that before I started the job, they wanted me to have the Radius experience. So I remember I invited my two sisters and we sat at one of their middle VIP tables in the dining room, and they gave us one of their tasting menus. So fine dining has evolved a lot since, or has not become as popular maybe as it was then. There are still some fine dining restaurants like the Barbara Lynch has Menton in Boston, and obviously there's still some places in New York City, but fine dining is I think a smaller market right now. But at the time, I think fine dining, Number 9 Park was open, and Beacon Street in the Beacon Hill Hotel, Number 9, I forget the name of it now, but so the fine dining world was sort of coming to be and slowly reaching its peak, I think, in Boston at that time. Anyway, so we went to dinner that night, my sisters and I, and had an extraordinary dinner. And there were a lot of great meals in people's lives, but that meal was so significant because it was really a first of a fine dining experience. The white tablecloth, the excellent fluid service, the course menu. I mean, I didn't even know that they had, the tasting menus, I didn't even know they really existed then. And it was just, my sisters and I were floored. And of course I wanted to work there. I thought this was extraordinary. Wow, what an experience. So I did do that. And it was where my love for food really fell into place, because I was able to taste foie gras from caviar to potatoes reblochon, all these just great fine French foods, and just fine French technique. It was Michael Schlau was the chef, which I may have mentioned already, and he is a great chef and still has many great restaurants to this day. And so that was I was at Radius for almost 4 years, and it was the boot camp of my whole service career. I will never forget that place. I'll never forget the amazing people I met and some of the relationships that I still have from the people there. And my mentors were all of them. SD Parsons, Michael owns all the great bakeries in Boston, and they were just great restaurateurs and great mentors to have. I learned everything from table side decorum to how to not touch my face on the floor. I mean, all these little details that you just don't even think about. And it was intense. There's no question about it. It was a lot. And when people talk about the restaurant world, they say, oh, you work a lot of hours. It's true. It's just a job that's becomes your life and everyone else's life around you too. So everyone else working that much makes you want to work that much. It just really consumes you, and you're a team. So you help each other out and you support each other, and everyone's lives. It's just a very they say it's incestual, but I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. But you're involved in people's lives and you help take care of people. And I learned that there. Esty was a great boss, and she was the general manager. I was just one of the managers. But she would really help people if they had trouble, or make them breakfast if they were coming in, or if someone's family was sick, she would send them home with food. They showed you how to take care of your staff and your family, really. So 4 years of that was intense, like I said, and I was ready for a change. I think 4 years at that time and at my age was a long time, and I was ready to go. And I left, and I was looking for a new experience. And I thought, well, I've always wanted to go to the West Coast. I wanted to go somewhere warm. And I gratefully had family who lived out in Los Angeles, and I was able to live with them. And I moved out to LA and looked for work out there. And I was staying outside in the Pacific Palisades, which is near Beverly Hills, or close enough that I could commute. And so I moved there, and I applied to 3 hotels right in Beverly Hills. So Beverly Hills has, within a mile radius, 3 hotels that are all 5-star, 5-diamond. And obviously because of the concentration of wealth, I guess, but 3 great hotel. And was the Beverly Hills Hotel, and the other one was Raffles Hermitage. And I got accepted into the Beverly Hills Hotel and Raffles Hermitage. And so I worked part-time at both of those places, and it was a hotel again. So I was kind of back in that space, just like CBI, Chatham Bars Inn, and sort of experiencing the corporate hotel hospitality side of the West Coast. And I really loved both jobs. Beverly Hills Hotel is a fantastic property. If you're ever out there, you kind of have to go. It's one of those properties, sort of like CBI. It's iconic. That opened, I think, in 1912, the Beverly Hills Hotel. Even the, if I can go back to that other slide, even just the sign is so iconic. I kind of left it there. They're famous for their palm tree wallpaper, and they actually built the Beverly Hills Hotel looking for property. So the town was literally built on property. Working there was I was one of the very few women who worked there, and I felt kind of honored to be in this crew. I mean, some of the people worked there had been there like 20, 30 years, and the place was just a machine. It was huge. It had so many floors. I mean, even just walking around the basement was confusing to figure out where I was supposed to go. I just remember that. And I do remember there's this great park. There's a lot of different outlets, they call them, different restaurants within the property. And one was the Polo Lounge. It's a famous bar. It still is a famous bar. And I remember I was behind the bar, and the older gentleman next to me, who'd been there for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, turned to me and said, "You're the first woman behind this bar." And I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. It didn't even really dawn on me that I would be the first bartender there, female bartender there. So that was sort of my own fun little claim to fame for me for the Polo Lounge. And then Raffles Hermitage was a lot more relaxed. At the time, it was owned by a wealthy Singapore company, I believe, and it just had a more kind of laid back, it had a more contemporary look, as you can see, but a beautiful property. And I learned, I had fun there, but I learned a lot about wine too. I kind of had access to some of the wine lists there, but not a lot. But I was starting to think about wine a little bit. But at Radius, which I wanted to share, was the real moment where I had my wine aha moment, where I thought, okay, this is where I want to be. I want to be in wine. I was waiting on a table, and no, I'm sorry, my sommelier was waiting on the table, and he asked me to go and serve the wine for the table. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not sure if I can do this. I haven't done this yet. This was in the beginning of the days. And I went to the table, and I actually presented the wine before serving. I actually had to present the wine and say, this is a Chambord Musigny. This is going to be, it's silky, it's smooth, it's beautiful. You're going to love it. And the guest said, okay, great. And I opened the bottle of wine, and I poured it out. And so Max, the sommelier, was in the weeds. So he wanted me to do this for him. And that's sort of what you do as a manager. When someone's in the weeds, they're not able to service their tables in the right fashion in the right amount of time. So I'd helped him do this. And at that moment at Radius, I thought, this is something I think I really want to do. And because it's a management role, but you're independent, and you're able to learn about the wines and share them with your guests, but also be part of the team. So when I left Radius, this was sort of in the back of my mind. And so when I went out to the West Coast, I thought a lot about wine and kind of what I wanted to do. And at Raffles Hermitage, that was when I had I hosted one event for the hotel for a lovely lady named Mireille Giuliano, who would later be a big factor in changing my life. And she was then the CEO of Veuve Clicquot. And I had saved her name tag because I liked her, and I just kept it in my sort of memorabilia from my time in Los Angeles. So after LA, I was there just a year. I remember hearing from a friend of mine on the East Coast who was actually out on the Cape, that there was a job opening up at the Wauwinet on Nantucket. And so I didn't know much about the Wauwinet. I knew it was a great place. I knew it had a great wine list, and I thought this might be a great opportunity. And she said, Camille, the job is a daytime sommelier. I think you should think about, applying. And I moved back home to the East Coast. So I came to the Wauwinet, and that's sort of one of my favorite pictures. It's the color is not exactly right, but the reason why I love this picture is because just like CBI, it had a beautiful view, and this is looking west out the back of the hotel. So, so for those of you who don't know the Wauwinet, it is a Relais and Chateau property, and it's on the corner of Nantucket, on the northeast corner, and it's a drive from town, about maybe 20 minutes from town, and it's a destination for a lot of people, and it's a small enough hotel that you don't feel like there's a lot of people there. And to me, I always think of that property as a place where time slows down. And as soon as I got there, I loved it. I really did. It was sort of like a little concentrated, and it was beautiful. And I thought, okay, this property is similar to what I know. And so I thought, all right, let's see how I can learn and contribute to the wine program here. So I'm thinking, okay, what can I do here? What can I learn? Come to find out, the wine list is massive. It is I should know all this stuff before going on the job, but I knew it was a good list. But once I got there, I really understood the magnitude of the list. So at the time, the cellar master was Craig Hanna, and he is still a friend of mine to this day. And he is my number one, probably wine mentor in my career. He really was the one who helped set my palate. He was the cellar master there for over 20 years. And that wine list that he ran and built won awards year after year after year. Wine Spectator magazine, a famous magazine, gives out these awards, the Grand Spectator Award, for great lists. So there's certain criteria, and this list had it all, and they won year after year. And there were 1,300 producers roughly, which means brands or names, right? And tens of thousands of 10 to 20,000 bottles. So one producer might have a range, right? So it was a very, very large list. And so of course I was extremely intimidated, very nervous going into this job. I did not have this experience yet, but it was only the daytime sommelier, and Craig was always there. And he always made me feel like I could go to him if I had questions, which I knew I would, and he knew I would, and he knew I would. So the daytime sommelier job was relatively easy, thankfully, because a lot of people weren't drinking big reds and cabs and older vintages and things like that. So I didn't have to learn so much about the list right away. So I got to learn, and I grew an appreciation for a lot of whites. Whites from the Loire, great Italian whites, great champagnes, Alsatian whites, and new and up and coming whites from South Africa and Australia. So I'm drinking, and I'm able to understand which ones would work with seafood and oysters and things like that. So it was a good kind of first intro. And then I was able to help out a little bit more in the evenings with Craig. And there were 2 other sommeliers that helped him too. So it was quite the team. And Craig also, what made him a great mentor also was he wasn't your typical sommelier. He wasn't this academic and always preaching about this and that taste and acidity and vintage. That he just drank the wine and said, "Here, this is really good. You should try it." I mean, of course, he could tell me any of those things. Anyone who knows a wine list like that and a sommelier at that level they are on another level intellectually, or they have a memory like no other, because there's just so much to remember, from producers to vintages to how things evolve over time and why this one evolves better than that one. And so he was extremely smart and had so much knowledge, but he didn't have to brag about it. And he knew that tasting is the only way to learn about wine. And with such access to such a great list, which was the key to that job, I was able to taste wines from Côte Rôties to old Corton Charlemagne's to beautiful old vintages of Krug, and all these great wines that are very, very hard to have access to. And with the Walwinnock clientele, we were able to open these bottles. And one other thing that might be interesting is you think, all right, how are you tasting these wines? Are you drinking the guest wine? No, not at all. But what happens is when you do open the wines tableside, you usually have a serving station, and you can bring the wine there, and you pour a little taste for yourself, which is just to ensure the quality of the wine is great for the guest. So you can do that. Sometimes you don't always have the time to do that, but with great bottles, you want to learn and taste for yourself. And then of course if there's wine left over in the bottle at the end of the evening for the guests and they leave it behind, we're able to taste it. So that was just a big exploration of all the old world wines, which is anything in Europe. And then new world wines are wines that are in the US, South America, South Africa, Australia. So that's sort of the way you think of it. And a lot are more old wines, that boat too. The other thing about being a sommelier, and that I learned at that job, was when people asked you, what should we drink? That's a very hard question, but that's usually where the conversation starts. And that's what the question I actually like, because that's when you turn to them and say, okay, well, what do you usually drink? Or what do you like? And what are you eating tonight? And what did you have last night? And what is your wife drinking, or your kids drink, or your children? What do they like to have if you're all sharing your dinner? And what would work with everybody? So it's sort of a mystery, and you sort of chip away at the answer, and then you come with it together. You come up with ideas or suggestions, and then you kind of come up with the answer together. And that's also what I learned there, was really how to explore the conversation with how to choose a bottle, and then how to present it to somebody. And it's like you give this in what it tastes like, how it will pair beautifully with their dinner, and everything's very ethereal until you open the bottle like a present, and you pour it, and they taste it, and there you can see the look on their face, and then you go back to the table and you see if they're enjoying it, and it's just a great experience, because then it becomes a reality, and it's something that they can savor literally and hold on to. And I loved doing that, and that was really fun. And it was an amazing team at the Walwinnock that year. I did not want to leave that job. I was going to stay there for as long as I could. I didn't want the season to end, and I was there, and I loved every day. And I love Nantucket, and I envisioned myself living there too. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't. But it was the winter season, and people had to go find winter work because the Walwinnock would shut down. So I was thinking about champagne, which was one of Craig's favorite categories of wine. And speaking of, and his passion bled onto me, and I loved learning about champagne. And champagne to me is one of those wines, which you may know goes with everything. It really can go with all types of food. And being a rosé or a vintage, you can explore all different intensities or lightness and richness with champagne. So it is one of my favorite wines. You can call it a wine. And Craig passed down his passion. And I remember I was thinking, okay, well, I need winter work. And I remember that name tag of Murray Giuliano from from the West Coast. And I wrote a handwritten letter to her. I even remember the stationery I used. It was like trimmed black navy crane. I was a letter writer. I get that from my mom. And I just thought, well, I might as well just give it a shot. I sent my resume and a letter to Paris because that's the only place I saw her name and address online at the time. And I sent it maybe in September, October, and I didn't hear back from them until December. And they said, we would love to meet with you and we will fly you down to New York City for a marketing job. I couldn't believe it. I was not at all thinking I was ever going to hear back from them. I was thinking of maybe going to Aspen, to Colorado to work out there. And I just didn't believe I was going to maybe go to New York and maybe do a 9-to-5 job. I said, is this really an option? And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go down there for this interview and I'll go to the office in the interview and I'll see how I feel. And if it feels right, I think I'll know it. And if it doesn't, then, I always have the will win it. So I flew down there. I mean, even that's impressive enough that they're flying me down for an interview. I'm 25 or so and 26. And I mean, I'm into the job already, just that they can fly me down to New York. But I mean, that's peanuts for these types of companies at the time. But I was still impressed that they would do that. I guess this is pre-Zoom meetings, right? And so I flew down there and I had the interview. And when I got there, I got to the building and it was on the west side in Chelsea. And the interview was in their offices in the building called the Starrett Lehigh building. And this building is on the west side, but it's right on the river, on the Hudson River. And it's one of the oldest manufacturing buildings in New York City. It's huge, but it's beautifully structured. It's actually curved and all brick on the side. And each story is massive. It's like 20, it's huge. It's like the ceilings are just like 18 feet inside. It's like an industrial building, but it was revamped and cool. And I think still Martha Stewart has like an entire floor there for her operation. And the offices for Clicquot, I think, were on the 11th floor. And they had wraparound balconies that overlooked the Hudson. And they only had a team of about, 35 people in the office. It wasn't a big company. And I got into the office, I had the interview, and I thought, yeah, I can work. I can definitely work here. And a market, 9-to-5, and getting paid $26,000 a year, which I have no idea how on earth I even managed that, but I did, and I moved to New York, and finding an apartment was another challenge. My dad was immensely helpful. I had 5 apartments in Brooklyn, 5 apartments in Manhattan that I was going to go look at, and he was my co-pilot. And I don't even know if I had a cell phone. I don't know. I remember just going up to each apartment and saying, Dad, if I'm not back in 15 minutes, come and get me. Each apartment, I wish I wrote stories with each person I met, because there are some great stories there for another time. But the last apartment I looked at, it was in Brooklyn, in Park Slope. And it was where I ended up living. And my roommate, Maria, is still one of my and this job became a big starting point for how I looked at wine, because I really saw the business side of things and how wine is positioned in the industry and how you sell it, how you market it, how you communicate it. So this was sort of that beginning of that lesson and that education. Also, the first day when I started the job, Mireille took me out to lunch at Jean Georges, which is a 3-star Michelin restaurant, or has been at one point. in the Trump Tower for lunch with a bottle of champagne for lunch. And of course I was impressed and I was amazed, but I couldn't believe she did that with every new employee, which was her routine and her tradition. And to this day, if I work with anybody or have a new employee, I always bring them to lunch or even buy them a sandwich, at least do something to welcome them. Another thing that she taught me, she was a great mentor too. And what was interesting about that job too is she hired a lot of people who worked in hospitality because she knew, she was a very smart woman. She knew that even though this was a business, of course, selling champagne, but that this is served in a scene of hospitality. So she had that sort of feeling with the people that she worked with. And so Murray became another great mentor of mine, and a wonderful French woman. She wrote the French Women Don't Get Fat book, which I don't know if any of you actually have read, but it came out several years when I was working with her, which is a great book. So New York, yeah. So Veuve Clicquot, there you go, the famous yellow label, and that building on the right is one of my apartments there in New York, and those bottles, there's Krug next to you, next to that picture, are one of the brands too that we represented. So Veuve Clicquot had a small little portfolio of wines, and it was a great little company, and they represented Krug. And these two labels are different that you can see. I just thought it'd be interesting. I actually found that in one of the wine cellars I worked at, that when they changed their labels, they had evolved. Surprisingly, the older label's on the right and the newer label is on the left. But again, at the company, I learned new label changes. How do you promote that in the press? New brands, new vintages, how do you launch them, throwing parties for these events, for these type of vintage events. And so that was part of the job. I wore many hats there. And the other thing that I loved about that job was it grew into something I didn't expect it, because Veuve Clicquot eventually merged with two other companies to become Moet Hennessy USA, which is part of the LVMH conglomerate group. Luxury conglomerate group. And with that, we gained more champagnes, Moet and Ruinart. Ruinart was part of actually our portfolio initially, right before the merger. And then a lot of still wines. So we had wines from all over the world. Spirits, we represented Belvedere, Chopin, Hennessy. We started 10 Cane. We had Grand Marnier, and another brand called Navan. And I might be missing a couple, but it was a lot of alcohol, a lot of incredible, powerful brands. And I learned a lot about the spirit brands and how it's just a fast moving market, and a lot of money to be spent on these brands. And it was, again, an education in business. But at that job, one of my bosses was Jeffrey Pogash, another mentor of mine who became my boss after the merger. And he was in communications and taught me a lot about how the brands are shared with the markets and how you market them, how you educate people, how you get the market excited about them. And so creating sort of campaigns around and so you don't think about these things when you see a bottle on the shelf. So also during that job, there was a gentleman named Charles Curtis who was a master of wine. So there's a sommelier and a master of wine, or an MS, master sommelier, and a master of wine. A master of wine is like a PhD. It's a much more elaborate program. There are fewer master of wines in the world. It's a very serious title and profession. It's you end up being really a more educator than maybe working in the field. So I learned through Charles that I really loved teaching about wine. he was a great teacher, and I loved learning from him. And I loved when we did a lot of market visits and would go out and help the salesman or what have you explain what's new with the brands or the vintage. We would get to really teach them. And to me, that was kind of the next level up for me about, okay, I love opening wine. I love learning about wine, but now I really love teaching about wine. And then you do that on the floor too. And that was sort of the first hint of it. But now I really got into like wanting to learn more about wine and teach about wine. So I'm grateful that Moet Hennessy paid for my diploma, my advanced diploma at the WSET, the Wine Spirits Education Trust, which is somewhat equivalent to an MS, and also a spirits certificate from the bar, which is a program in New York City. And so with the Moet Hennessy job, I was I loved it. I was in New York. I loved every minute there too. It was a great job. And I didn't want to leave that job either. And then, but then I had a roadblock, one of my first roadblocks in life. And I was offered another job somewhere else. And I sort of counter offered having to leave. And this other job was a great opportunity, but I ended up making a bad decision. I made a wrong decision, and I left Moet Hennessy, and I still regret it to this day. And the other job really didn't work out. It wasn't the right fit for me. And I felt I was back in New York. And I found myself going back into restaurants and working at some other establishments in New York. And I could have gone back to Moet, but I didn't want to. I wanted to move on and keep going into a new sort of level of service or a new experience to learn more about wine, or to educate people if I'm in the restaurant again, and being able to educate your staff and your guests. So one thing about people in the restaurant industry is you move around based on sort of the pedigree of the people that you're going to go work for. For example, the chef worked at Alain Ducasse, which is one of the reasons why I went to one place. Or this place is owned by so-and-so, and it has a good background and a good portfolio of other restaurants or chains that they own. So you sort of kind of follow the brand that fits best for you. So I ended up going to a hotel that was open. Very cool, laid back, relaxed type of service, but really great food, and kind of an international crowd. The property was owned by two Mexican gentlemen who really talented, have some great hotels in Mexico. And the chef, the general manager had worked with Alain Ducasse. So it was, who's a famous French chef. And so I just knew, again, that I was going to have a good set of people that I'd work with and learn from. And then Monkey Bar is the restaurant on the right. And that is was an iconic property in a hotel in New York. And it was owned by Graydon Carter, who used to be the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair. And at that property, I was manager at both and worked on the wine lists on both at both locations. And just learned more about wine and about managing people, and just having a lot of good experiences. But I was kind of coming to a max. I was almost 10 years in New York, and I thought, I think it's time for something else. I definitely felt a calling to something a little bit more culinary. Really, I thought that's the one piece of this industry that I haven't really tapped into. And I loved to cook, and I loved the food, and I was really into that side of the business, but I just had never been on the line in the kitchen. But I wasn't going to just stop everything that I was doing and go to culinary school. I didn't have the money to do that, and I wasn't necessarily to be a chef. I just learned more about experience, and learn a little more about cooking. And then I didn't think working in a kitchen in New York was the right fit either. So I actually spoke to the general manager at Hotel Americano, and he had a French friend who was a chef in southern France, and he he had come to visit the hotel once, and I told him about what I wanted to do, about maybe getting into the culinary world, and he said that he does stages at his restaurant in southern France, and a stage is sort of like a free internship if they house you. And I said, oh my gosh, really? Wait, you might be able to house me and I can cook in southern France for a few months? Is this really? Uh, I'm going to admit I'm a Francophile through and through. And I even felt that way when I was in high school studying French. I just love the French culture. And then learning more about wine and the food, I was just blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, I had him write down on a napkin that I could do a stage. And it wasn't because it was in a casual conversation, but I wasn't going to let this go. I knew this was a great opportunity, an opportunity almost of a lifetime. I said, I'm going to do this. And I followed up, and I got the stage, and I went to France in 2014. I left New York, and that was, I think, a total dream. It still kind of feels like a dream. It was 4 months in France, in southern France. I was right outside of Arles, or Halle. That's how the French say it. If I say Arles, they don't know what I'm talking about. And so I went there and I stayed. Let's see if that's it. That's the chef and the gardens. I went to, the restaurant was called La Chassaignette, and it was a Michelin rated restaurant, and it had a 5-acre farm, and it was beautiful. And we did services for both lunch and dinner every single day. I had my own garde-manger station, which is a cold station. So not a lot of responsibility of cooking and things like that. So it was mostly salads, but it was my own station and I loved it. I loved having my own mise en place, which is everything in its place. That's what it translates to. But it's all of your garnishes and all of your containers of all your goodies and vegetables and leaves and lettuces and grains and what have you, salt and pepper. And this job was kind of a dream. I stayed in this little place in the middle. That was my apartment, and it overlooked the river right there on the left of the Rhone. And it was my little apartment. And on the right is where there are some sunflowers. And that was my walk home. I would walk to the restaurant every day and could walk home during the breaks, but I would stay on the farm and just explore. And it was kind of living a dream. I knew it wasn't, well, at that time, I knew it was going to be fleeting. And I was old enough to recognize that this is, yeah, I mean, I'm 34, 33, and I'm thinking, this feels so special. And I can't believe I landed here. I felt really, really lucky. And the chef was great. The food was great. The restaurant was actually owned by a very wealthy woman, a Swiss woman named Maya Hoffman. And she actually spent a lot of time in the Camargue, which is the region around Arles that is all conservation land. She spent a lot of time there as a child. So she's preserved a lot of the time of the lands there and built this restaurant among some other hotels. And she's also reinventing and really reinvigorating Arles, which is a beautiful city. It's where Van Gogh painted. A lot of his famous works are from there. And but she just built and it's just very new news right now. So if you see it, you might come across it. But so she owned the restaurant, and it was just a fantastic experience. I mean, living, breathing food and wine every day. Even our staff meals were delicious, and learning just more about the wines there too were great. This is sort of the crew in the middle. There's a pastry chef, another waitress, a sommelier, and another chef. but the main chef's in the middle. And that's us actually in London. We did one weekend gig for Maya at our home in London. And so that's the crew. And to the right is the outdoor eating area, which a lot of people, that's sort of one of the main dining areas, is outside, and it's just beautiful. But that's where we have family meal. And then on the left, where I wash vegetables from the garden, and that was sort of my first routine. Every single day was washing vegetables for the restaurant. And being there, the wines were fantastic because they were smaller producers that we don't have access to in the States. So there's a lot of wines when you go to Europe, in France and Italy especially, that you might try a lot of great wines and say, oh, I'd love to have this at home, but a lot of wines just don't make it here. There's not enough that they consume it there instead. They like their wine too. So you don't always get to try some of these wines. So I don't even remember some of the producers, but there was just so much fresh, great wine that I was able to taste that I would never have tried here in the States. And the other thing I learned was, I didn't learn how to be a chef there, but I learned how to work in a kitchen. And I didn't put one picture up there, but I mean, there's one picture of my nails and what my shoes look like. And I took a picture of my nails and my shoes just because I don't think I ever did just so much physical work day in, day out for so long. I did I did work the floor for a month as well to help with the wine. And I have a little bit of French, so it helped a little bit, but it was still a challenge. To immerse yourself in another culture when you fully don't understand everything everyone's saying. That's the tough part, because you want to jump in and share a lot. But they were great people, and I had a great experience. And there's a little bit of my soul there, and I didn't want to leave that job either. I mean, do you see a pattern here? Either I fall hard for these jobs, or I have I'm an easy sell. I don't know. I don't know, but it's different how you kind of fall for certain things in your life throughout your life. And I feel lucky that I had these happy moments where I felt a part of all these jobs wholly, 100%, that I loved being there. And that doesn't always happen in someone's career. And you hope it does. And either way, you want to just give it your all, even if it's not the right way. And they're just all in the presentation, but that's how you learn. But when you're with a good group of people, and that's always what I want. I always wanted to be around great people who I can learn from, and ideally be in a beautiful place aesthetically that would be, make it a fun experience. So after France, I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back, and I talked to the chef and I said, can we work a visa situation out? I want to return indefinitely. And so after that experience, I applied for a visa, and that was a long process. I ended up coming home and waiting for the visa for a few months. And this is the hard part of the story for me, because I really wanted to go to France, and I know my parents didn't want me to go. They didn't want me to not come back. But there was a piece again of my soul there, and I wanted to live there. And when I came back and I was waiting for that visa, I had another one of those hard roadblocks, one of those decisions that presented itself. And I had to turn the visa down. And it was a really tough decision, but it was an easy one at the time. Something just didn't feel right. Something happened in my life, and I turned it down. And that was really hard. I was hard to tell the chef. I told him face to face when I saw him in New York one time. I had to, I had to break the news, and that was a really tough moment. But I felt that I was trying to follow my heart and do what was right. And it sounds silly because I'm telling you how much it was great and how I loved it. What could have happened? But it was a personal decision, and I found myself back in Boston. kind of spring. Like I could go back to New York at this point. I was at a real crossroads. It was one of those times in your life where you kind of feel like you're restarting. I was even living with my sister in Charlestown and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And nothing was really appealing to me in Boston either. There are a few restaurateurs and people I like, but I just, after being in France, I really started loving the farm to table real experience. And I also knew that was sort of where the food scene was going, right? I had done the fine dining. I saw a real renaissance of food in New York happen with a lot of great restaurants that opened up. I feel very lucky that I was there at that time. It's going to take a long time to rebuild what we've lost over the past couple of years. But I was really lucky to have been there for 10 years, practically just seeing a great so nothing was appealing to me in Boston or even necessarily back in New York. And so I actually went to just visit my other sister. I have two sisters. I had said who joined me for dinner that night. And I was staying with the oldest one, but then my other sister, the middle, I'm the youngest. I went over to her house and I remember I was just sitting on the couch. We were talking and I just picked up a magazine, Edible Magazine, Boston. And I opened up the magazine and I saw a great article on Ben Elliott, a chef from Concord, Massachusetts. And the chef had worked at Number 9 Park with Barbara Lynch in Boston. And he had moved back to Concord and to take over his grandfather's farm in Concord. And he has a little cooking school and a catering company. And I thought, wow, this sounds really, really interesting. Like nothing else I know around Boston. And I thought, wow, I'd love to connect with this man and see what this is more, if there's some opportunity here. And so I called up Ben and I met with him a couple times. And I remember he toured the farm and we talked and he was so funny. And I just like Ben. No, everybody likes Ben who meets Ben. He's just one of those guys. He's charismatic. He's funny. He's, makes jokes about himself and he's just so easygoing. But I also remember that he had some great food though. Like I knew that he had some good food experience. So I was just sort of on hold. He told me, you're great. We'd love to hire you, but we're really not sure what we're going to be doing and what we would need you for. Or we might have some ideas, but just not yet kind of thing. He was just kind of holding on to me and I didn't know what was going to happen, but I had faith and I thought, okay, I'm just going to kind of hold up this and go. And in the meantime, I was killing time. And I remember I went back to Nantucket to pick up a few shifts at the Wawinit. Craig was always welcoming, always let me come back. And over the years, I had actually gone to visit the Nantucket a couple times. And so I was still very familiar with the island and the great food scene and wine scene there. And I remember I was on Nantucket, and this is where the media chapter begins, where I was sitting at my friend Karen's house, and she's the one who housed me from the very beginning when I started at the Wawinit. And we still remain friends to this day. And Karen and I were sitting there, and there was some woman on the radio. We were listening to the radio, and there was some woman on the radio talking about this art opening and this event. And I thought, why isn't anybody talking about the awesome food and wine here and the wine festival and just the high concentration of great talent and food here? And a lot of people leave the city and open up restaurants in Nantucket. So there's a lot of different pedigree there too that is fun to explore. And then of course the wine festival and all the great winemakers that come there. And so I called up the radio station and I shoot from the hip. Have you picked up on that? I just kind of go with my gut and just throw out the fishing line. So I called up the radio station and I spoke to the general manager, Laura Burnett, and I said, hey, are you interested in maybe a show about food and wine? And she goes, we actually just acquired the NPR station and we're looking for new content. And she said, why don't you put together a presentation and present it to the owner of the station and we'll see what happens. And so I did that, and they gave me a show. They gave me a radio show. But don't get me wrong, this was very low key. I self-produced it myself. I self-produced it myself. I self-produced it, and I didn't get paid a penny. It was work that during the show was enough work of my own time. So I started the show, and I started putting some shows out there. And then I finally heard from Ben Elliott, and he goes, Camille, we'd love to hire you. We're going to open a restaurant, and we'd love for you to help out with the catering, the restaurant, and the cooking school. And I thought, okay, great. I'd love to help, but I just started this radio show. Would you allow me to? I want to be able to do both. Will you, that was sort of the plan. That was my contingency. I'd have to keep the show. And he said, yeah, of course. So I was able to just work that into the weekends and record shows in advance. None of it was live. And so I continued doing the show, and then started at Saltbox. That was the name, Saltbox Farm. And we had, we can move along now on these slides. So there's me at the radio station, and those are a couple of my guests. And that's me editing at home. Thankfully, you could do a lot of stuff at home with, obviously, as many people know, with podcasts and whatnot. And then there's me and Jacques for one of my favorite guests. I did about 60 shows in all, 6 seasons. So it was a long running show. And then here's the Saltbox team. So the restaurant's on the left right before we opened, and then on the right is the team, the opening team. And so so I was at Saltbox, and I remember I had been there just under a year right before we opened the restaurant. And then it was opening week, and we had a wedding too. We had a lot of catering gigs. So I was double duty, and it was just a lot. We were opening the restaurant and running a busy catering business, and still doing some cooking classes. But the catering was in full force. It was wedding season. And I remember we went to this wedding, and it was at the Lincoln. It was in Lincoln at the Pierce House. And I remember I saw a videographer there, and this is the beginning. I knew that there was something there, and this was sort of the beginning of the next stage, which is Juharo. The videographer was going to be my future husband, and we met at that. And 5 months later we were engaged, and a year later we were married. This is the Saltbox team, and there you go. And so we got married, and from that moment on, we always talked about working together. And I stayed with Saltbox for a little bit, and then right before we got married, I stopped working at Saltbox and started working with my husband, Julian. And he was a self-taught videographer, and he started his own company just the year before I met him. And we started thinking about ways for us to collaborate on a lot of projects. And it's funny how everything has sort of come for a full circle, if you actually believe it, because video is very similar to what I was doing with food and wine. you put all the pieces together, right? You collect your ingredients, food or film, and you make it into something special, and you end up sharing it and hoping to inspire, educate people. So somehow it kind of worked, and I feel like I brought, obviously, the audio and for the show into our work, which we do a lot of documentary stuff, a lot of interviews and testimonials and whatnot. And then the video producing, which is communications and things that I've done from events on in all the restaurants and hotels I used to work at. And ultimately also my sort of branding luxury experience from Moet Hennessy, where people always need a story that they want to tell. And so I'm sort of helping the business in that way. And Julian really handles all the filming and the editing. But we have been able to work together, and we now work with many different industries across the board. But the food and wine was sort of what brought us together. He had been working in restaurants before we met, and he left his job to start his own business. And it's funny because the first time when I met him, I had to look at his see some of his which I did, thankfully. But I saw that this video was a montage of coastal regions in New England, and I'm looking closer and I'm seeing this lighthouse and I'm seeing some of these familiar places, and lo and behold, there were places in Chatham that were in his video. And I thought, oh my goodness, this can't be. And when I met him, he was living in Burlington, Vermont, so I had no idea he had any connection to the Cape. And lo and behold, his mother used to vacation in Harwich and in Chatham, and so he knew the area pretty well. And so that was sort of just a funny little tidbit about how you have some familiarities with people that you end up meeting. But so we, after 1 year of working on Juharo and after being married, we went and traveled a bit and went to Barolo. And yeah, why not, right? No, we went to Barolo. Actually, my friend had a birthday party, and she lived, a friend I met through Saltbox, one of our clients, actually, she's become a good friend, and she has a house in Italy, and we ended up going there for her birthday, and we ended up visiting Barolo, and we met a great family out there and did some video work for them. And we ended up creating our first piece together, our first video together, and it was a little wine story about a Barolo winemaker. And we ended up sending it to the Wine Spectator, which does a video award every year. And we won the Best Video of the Year award right out of the gates. We were over the moon. We were shocked. We couldn't believe it. And this is us getting our picture taken for the magazine for the award. Got to go to our grand tasting, which is a huge annual event, and we had free tickets there, and we were able to receive the award. Actually, Julian actually had a gig that day, which is sad to say, but you got to do what you got to do. And I was able to go there, and I was escorted by my old friend and mentor, Jeffrey Pogash, who I was able to share the experience with. So so that was fun. And so here we are, Juharo Productions. It's been a journey, as hopefully you were entertained slightly or learned something a bit about wine and what it's like to be behind the scenes of this industry. But ultimately, I did follow my gut, my intuition, and really my palate throughout my life, and had great support from my family, of course, to make all these decisions and not be challenged. They let me find my way, and here I am in a place I could have never imagined, happier than I've could have imagined, doing something that I didn't think I'd imagine. And it was all through just learning along the way and getting inspired by people and taking taking a bit of everything from your experiences and And just to end, I feel that it was an honor to be able to, not many people get a chance to reflect on their life in a way, or their career. I'm still relatively young, so I hope I have a lot more to do with Joharo. But to look back with a different mindset and maturity, to see the choices you make and why, and to sort of relive this a bit. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I truly hope you learned something about maybe walking in someone else's shoes, and hopefully get a little bit inspired to do a little more wine education for yourself, because it's never ending. And I hope you continue having your own journey too. So there you go. I do have one video I'd love to share with you all, which is another piece and project that my husband and I have been working on. It's called Winemakers, and it is a it's similar to that. It's just really it's a profile piece of ideally independent, different winemakers, and ideally around the world. But this is just a sort of like a teaser for a sample of what we would pitch a network or something like that. But this is something that we wanted to create, in a series we wanted to create. And this particular winemaker is one that I had met through my work at Moet Hennessy. I had known him for almost 10 years. And so we were able to travel during our time to visit France and to make this video. And ultimately, one other lasting lesson of life is that I would share with even my children. Now I have 2 kids, that you just never know who you're going to meet along the way, and that you want to be kind to everybody, because you just never know how they're going to make an impact in your life. And that's probably reflecting on these stories. So anyway, I think Christina will share it with you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, I can't wait to hear from you all.
My vision about my work as a winemaker is to express what we have outside. It's not to express myself. When I open my window in the morning, I see that vineyard, and someone was seeing the same vineyard 300 years ago in the same place, and someone will see it after me. So Bordeaux is one of the most important wine regions all over the world. Today, the winemakers spend probably more time in the vineyard than they spend in the winery. Wine is all about passion and emotions. And it's all about consistency, little by little, step by step, year after year. I'm really passionate about vineyards, but blending is a key moment, because at that time you decide how your wine will be. Blending it takes months and a lot of different tasting. Imagine that you have to play an orchestra with 50 different musicians. First of all, you have to do the selection of all of them individually, and you have the violinist playing violin, and you have the pianist playing piano, and they practice separately. And when they reach a certain level, they start to play together. So it's exactly the same thing. We taste all the wine, we have the real picture of all the tank and all the barrique, and little by little we start to see how this will work. The good thing about wine is the past talk about your future. So when you taste Canon 55, 64, 47, 29, you see the outstanding quality of the terroir, so you understand how you can work today to do the same thing in the future. Every year is a new challenge, the climate is not the same, it's always changing. So you always have a new story to write. And as I told you, on my point of view, we are just here at the service of the vineyard, at the service of that outstanding land and terroir we have outside, and trying to express this in the best way.
That was great, Camille. Thank you.
I must apologize. I'm sorry if I went a little bit over time here.
No worries. Everyone's engaged. No one left the room. So I think everyone wanted to hear how you got to where you are.
I'm so
Um,
sorry. When
No
I
worries.
practiced, I didn't go that long. I just must have been nervous. I'm sorry.
Well, we do have a few questions. People are seeking advice on many things. So I'll start off with, let's see, what advice would you offer for someone navigating a dinner at an Italian restaurant?
Navigating the wine list, right? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Okay, Italy is tough. It's tough for me. It's because there's just more and more regions becoming more popular. I think, 20 years ago, it was just like Tuscany or in Piedmont, and now there's Puglia and Sicily, and there's just so many different regions that are becoming more accessible, it's great. Again, the one thing I didn't say is your sommelier is your guide, right? How I told my story about how you create the answer for what they're looking for. You have to engage with your sommelier and tell them, you have to trust them. You'll come up with the answer with them. If there's not a sommelier there and you're just at a local restaurant, know that. And if you just say, is there, can I speak to the manager? Can they quickly guide me? Because you're just going to learn more that way. If you're just going to shoot in the dark, you can do that too. That's fine. Maybe get 2 bottles and see that under like $40 and then just play around. That's half the fun.
That's good advice. 2 bottles of wine is always fun. What are some of your favorite wine festivals in the United States?
Oh, that's a good one.
Like good places to go to experience different types of wine.
Yeah. I will say the Nantucket Wine Festival is great, but it's become very crowded. So if you go, I would really, really accentuate and encourage to go to the seminars and the exterior events that are happening outside of the tasting rooms. A lot of tasting events are just massive. You don't, there's a lot of ways to be able to explore a wine and taste a wine, but a lot of those tastings kind of can just become not so engaging. But anyway, the Aspen was my favorite. It's just beautiful, and it doesn't seem so intense and crowded. And the exterior events are just all the dinners. It's all right there in the village. That was my favorite festival. That was the best one and the most beautiful.
And another question is, will most of your productions in your new company still revolve around food and wine?
Yeah, that's been my goal. I've been trying to get more. We just got a great new hospitality client. It's called Lark Hotels. They own some properties in Nantucket and up in Maine, and they're growing and expanding. I'm really excited about that because we speak the same language. We've done some Cuisinart videos. We're really I'm working on more food and wine clients. However, we have architect clients, interior design clients, which are all great because they are sort of at we try to have an upper tier clientele. And I still like design, and that was part of my sort of luxury branding experience, which I still find fascinating anyway. But the winemakers is kind of where we're having our outlet to do other stuff.
Yeah. And what are some of your favorite restaurants here on the Cape, Boston, and New York, if you could list offhand?
New York, there's still some good ones there. It's hard for me to say because I've had 2 kids in like the past 3 years, so I haven't gone out much, and with everything that's going on, it's hard for me to say. But there's some great restaurant I heard about in Yarmouth that's supposed to be really good. It's downtown. It's like maybe it has some garden type of name or something. I still love CBI. I think the tavern, last time I went there, the food was awesome. And the little wine place right in Chatham was great too. But yeah, I don't know enough about the Cape. Boston, I haven't even been to Menton, so I still want to go there. There's a lot of cool places, popping up in Somerville, in Concord, there's a restaurant that opened up called until it's sort of like a Blue Hill Stone Barns, if anybody knows about that property in New York. It's with Dan Barber, the famous chef. Anyway, the woman who owns this restaurant, Woods Hill Table, she has a farm and she gets all the meat from there. And it's just, the quality of food is just exceptional. And I'd go there first if I had a free night.
Now, this last question is rather niche, as I think it pertains to a friend of your father's. Seems to know a lot about wine as well as your father knows about cars. If you drive an Austin Healey 104 to a French restaurant, what type of wine would you choose?
An Austin Healey to a restaurant?
Yeah.
Austin Healey. I just watched James Bond, so I'm thinking Austin Martin.
Yeah.
But Austin Healey is a little more peppier. Let's see. Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. Oh goodness. I'd have to go Bubbles, of course.
Yeah.
Just do a dry, I can't say Bollinger because that's James Bond. Just maybe a Perrier Jouet or something. Who knows? Who knows? That's a tough question.
Yeah. The last one I think we'll ask is, now, does wine take a back seat in some of the farm to table dinners that have become more popular today, do you think?
That's a good question. I hope not. That's a big part of the experience, because you learn why wine goes with food. And if you don't bring attention to that, you kind of miss an opportunity to have an even better dinner and party. So if you don't incorporate that element, you're just missing out on more fun. So, but I think people are focusing on the food a lot. That's fine. That's good. They might not have the budget or the interest maybe, which is fine too. So it's just an opportunity to elevate an experience. So you don't want to leave that element behind, just like music, lighting. I mean, all that stuff's important for a party. And who doesn't like walking into a party and there's a good bar
happening? Yeah, exactly. I think we've hit all our questions for today. I'm a Francophile too, lived in south of France for a little bit as well. So you and I could talk all night. But I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your career path, and just your love for life and wine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camille. That's great. I'm
Thanks,
so glad
guys.
you were able to join us, and now I can go home and have a couple of glasses of wine before I go to bed. So.
Don't always buy the same wine. Go explore other things. You don't even know what you're missing if you don't try anything. And an average bottle a good bottle could be $10, but an exceptional bottle could be 30. I mean, it might be worth $20 to just have an amazing experience. So just invest in your fun.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much.
Thank you so much.